Hello and welcome to the MovieKing Podcast. My name is David Jurmann and I'll be your host. On today's show, I'm going to review the film Juror number 2. So this film is a new film from Clint Eastwood. It might be his final movie that he directs, as he is currently 94 years old, which is insane to me. I mean, really, and I don't think anyone expected him to keep making movies this far. I mean, back when he made, The Mule in like 2018 or something, I think it was like 2018, we kind of assumed that would maybe be his last movie. And then he did Richard Jewell, and we said that might be his last movie. And then he did Cry Macho after that, and we said that might be his last movie. And here he comes again, once more at 94 years old, thinking it might be his last movie. But even then, we're not so sure. But even so, I just wanted to make sure I saw that because he is just such a legend in Hollywood. He's been going on for such a long time, making so many movies, starring in so many movies. And I actually did some research presentation on him in film school, so I know quite a bit on him as well. And I was just really excited for this film. The movie is from Warner Brothers and came out a few weeks ago. If you haven't heard much about it, it's likely because Warner Brothers is basically burying this movie in theaters. They don't really want too much buzz getting out about it. It was announced shortly before the release in early November that Warner Brothers was only releasing the film in less than 50 theaters across the nation, with no plans to expand, and it wouldn't report on any box office numbers as well. So they really didn't want any information getting out on how well this movie was doing. There really were no plans to put this any further than it was. And that was really shocking to me. I didn't really understand why. The trailer came out also very last minute, only maybe a month before the release date, and wasn't shown in theaters at all. I mean, I've gone to theaters a bunch in the past month or so, and I never saw a trailer for it once. Originally, it really just seemed like the studio was not confident in the film, and so they would want to put it out as quietly as possible. I mean, that's what I took away from it, at least. Because why would you put a trailer out pretty last minute and, then not report on how well the movie's doing and only put it out in so few theaters that most people can't even watch it? And especially for someone as big as Clint Eastwood, this isn't a movie made by nobody. I mean, this is Clint Eastwood. Like, how could you not publicize and market this movie? And all this would line up with reports from a few years ago when Warner Brothers got bought out by Warner Brothers Discovery, that boss David Zaslav was furious the studio had greenlit Cry Macho a few years prior, despite knowing it would probably lose money, and only did it because of Eastwood's legacy and good reputation at the studio, i.e. he stayed in budget and delivered his film on time, didn't cause any problems. So again, the studio really just felt like they owed him some respect in a movie if he wanted to make one. David Zaslav really didn't understand why they would do that. And that kind of just really added the fuel to the fire for this film, that maybe, even though they greenlit this movie, Juror number 2 for Clint Eastwood, maybe the studio was just like, we don't think this is going to do very well, we're just going to bury it. And David Zaslav reportedly also told employees at the time that they didn't owe Clint Eastwood any favors. But that might not be the full story here, because as more reports came out over time, it became kind of clear that Warner Brothers didn't think the movie was actually bad. They had just planned on making the film a streaming exclusive, and actually favored the film's planned release by putting it in theaters at all. I mean, this movie wasn't even supposed to be in theaters, supposedly. It was just supposed to be put on streaming, and actually giving it the 50 theaters at all was probably better than this movie was ever going to get. So, I mean, in retrospect, it's actually kind of nice this movie got put in theaters at all. But my guess why they would do this is probably just to make it eligible for award season. I think there's some rules the Oscar has that in order for a movie to be up for Best Picture, it needs to be released in a certain amount of theaters for a certain amount of time. I'm pretty sure that's what they say. I'm not too familiar on exactly what the rules are for that, but I believe this would qualify its release for that. And it is a movie that got good reviews, and seems like something that could potentially be up for consideration later down the line. But enough on the background of it all. How is the movie itself? Very good, actually. It's a solid courtroom drama. I think it's a very compelling story with interesting themes and a great lead performance. The film is about a man who is summoned for jury duty, and upon hearing details of the case, realizes he may have unintentionally killed the victim. I think the premise is really terrific for this film. I love stories that challenge the morals of a character and have them constantly grappling with their own inner demons. I think it's just such a cool concept. Whenever we get a movie like this, not too long ago, we got like Anatomy of a Fall, which had this woman on trial for the death of her husband. And just kind of the big question of that movie was like, did she do it? Did she not do it? Did she murder him? And here we have a film that's really like, this guy just didn't realize what he did. And now the question of the movie is, did he do it? And is he going to do anything about it? This movie has a lot of great metaphors for secrets and addiction, about how good people can make bad decisions, seemingly bad people can change and deserve mercy, and how we as people and sort of the audience judge them on so little, just really on the information we're given at the time, and then see it as justice when they're put behind bars. And Clint Eastwood as a filmmaker has still got it here, even at such an old age, 94 years old. He really still is a good filmmaker. And granted, he's not the most particular filmmaker out there, and his methods are pretty go with the flow, but he does a good job here. I mean, like a lot of the time when he directs, he doesn't really do a lot of takes. I don't even think he says action when like making a movie. I think they just kind of roll, and if he does a couple takes, he's like, all right, good, let's move on. That's why he's often so on time, and it's not a very traditional way to make a movie, but it's worked for him a lot of the time, and it works again here. And look, Clint Eastwood has made a lot of movies, and while his recent ones were still okay, I think this is easily his best work since American Sniper, which was up for a lot of awards when that came out. And this movie is definitely carried a lot by Nicholas Holt's performance. He shows a lot on his mind throughout the film. He's often pretty subtle, but conveys a lot of emotion at the same time. You can really just see and feel the guilt eating away at him more and more as it goes on. I love that. Just really, it's like a boiling kind of emotion where you really just see Nicholas Holt's, character at the beginning, sort of start off calm and, easygoing, and like throughout the film, it's not like he does, too much, but it's really like just internally, you can see it eating away at him, not really knowing what to do, and I just love that. I think it makes for a very compelling performance. I don't know if he'll be nominated for Best Actor, but he's definitely one of the stronger performances of the year. And supporting actors are also very good, especially J.K. Simmons, Zoe Deutsch, and Toni Collette. All very good actors and all very good here. Cinematically, the film is also well done. There's nice cinematography, very good editing, it's well paced, but it is a slow burn, I have to note. It does go by at a slow pace, but it is well paced. And I think it's very well written too. The script here is actually pretty tough because it forces basically this one character in a place where there's only so much you can do. Like, he's in a courtroom just listening to people talk. He can only say so much because if he says anything, he probably goes to jail. And if he doesn't, then it's just kind of like the movie just goes on as normal. So he can only do so much interfering in this case to really say anything at all. But the movie just finds ways to explore the characters around him and their views on what's happening. So it really just kind of helps the movie show different perspectives and kind of tell more than just this one bit of the story. And just kind of, I think, touches on a lot of great themes here. Again, really just especially about how we kind of, as outsiders, see these people's stories and, what we take away from them and how we judge them without even maybe giving them the proper time that they need. The movie also does give a pretty clear answer by the end on whether or not the protagonist did what he suspected. It's not really like Anatomy of a Fall, which, purposefully lets the audience determine that for themselves. I mean, by the end of that movie, it's really up to you to determine whether she did kill her husband or not. In this movie, Juror number 2, though, it does give a more definitive answer on the thing. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think it's a problem that it does, because the movie's not trying to make it very ambiguous. It's just trying to ask questions to you to then think about, like, what would you do? What would you say? How would you react to the situation? And I think it works very well as a thinking film where, really you're just watching it the whole time, just really like processing it in your head, like, man, like this kind of, this kind of situation is terrible. Like, what would you do, Really good stuff. I love those kind of stories. And the movie also poses a lot of great moral questions where the outcomes are both losses, and it's really just a matter of which way things will go down. Like, I mean, really, the way this movie kind of goes, it's a lose-lose for the characters. Like, really the main plot of this movie, which I don't want to say because I think it's just, it's more impactful when you see it, but you can feel that no matter how this goes, someone is going to lose. And you don't want to see either of these people lose. You just want to see, everyone get justice and what they deserve. You want justice to come through, but you realize that the truth isn't always justice, and it's not always as satisfying as you want it to be. The movie finds ways to make a relatively simple story also feel layered and engaging. There's really not too much that's crazy going on in this story. It's a very small-scale film, but the way the characters interact with each other, the kind of conversations they have, the way things play out, it just all feels thought out and really, just really interesting to watch and see how is it going to go. That's what really keeps you going. It's more of a drama, but in some ways it feels like a thriller because you're just like, how's this going to go? I really just want to see how this is all going to go down, even though it's just a lot of talking, but it feels very big in the stakes of things. The stakes are huge. I don't really have many issues with the film. One is that I think they probably could have played around with the timing of flashbacks more, so when things are revealed, they could maybe feel more impactful. The movie doesn't, do a bad job with this, it's just that the way the film is paced, I think, if you gave the flashbacks earlier on without context, and then we heard what happened later on, I think it might feel a little more, impactful in the moment, just, realizing what's happening. But instead what the movie chooses to do is have a character say something, and then it'll kind of flash back to show it, and then a character say something else. It because a flashback for that too. I think it would have been more effective a different way. I don't really have an issue with the flashbacks. I just wish they were maybe handled a little differently. And my other issue, probably my biggest issue with the film, is the ending, which purposefully left everything very open-ended. That's not really a spoiler of any kind, but it's very ambiguous. And I think in the moment, it didn't feel all that satisfying. But I think more than that, it also just didn't feel like an ending. Sometimes an ending can not give a full answer to what's happening in the film, but still feel like an ending to the story we watched. There are a lot of films that do that, where maybe it'll end and you wish you saw more. Like The Fault in Our Stars is a great example of this, where you want to know what happens to the character. Like, their story isn't over. There's more to their story about whether they live or die, and you want to see what happens there. But the ending to the story you watched still happens. Like, the story that they told at the beginning, it ends. So you feel satisfied in that sense. This movie, I don't think really has a great ending. It feels more like a cliffhanger type of ending, even though we won't get a resolution to it, because I highly doubt this movie's getting a sequel. Let's be honest, I don't think this movie's getting a sequel. But it's the type of ending that's supposed to spark discussion of, what's gonna happen? How does this go? I just didn't really feel like it was a very satisfying way to end the film. I mean, everyone in my theater, which is a pretty packed showing, by the way, because, again, this movie's barely playing in any theaters at all, so, everyone just gathered around this one theater. And as soon as the movie ended, I just heard so many people be like, oh, no, don't end here. And it's the kind of ending that, you hear after, The Force Awakens, Star Wars The Force Awakens, when you see Luke on the mountain and you're just like, come on, say something. Don't end here. That's what this kind of ending feels like. It's not really an ending, it's just very open-ended. But really, I still just have no idea why Warner Brothers didn't give this movie a larger release. Even if you want to put it on streaming, and you don't want to put it in that many theaters because you don't think it's going to make that much money, I think they should have at least considered expanding it. It's not a movie that begs to be watched on the big screen. I mean, I'm going to be completely honest, it's not a movie that you have to watch in theaters to really get the most out of it. but it is a very captivating movie and would definitely get people talking about it. Like, I think the plot alone, it's begging for discussion. It's begging for people to go out and talk about it and say, like, wow, what do you think of that? Those kind of movies do connect with an audience, and they get people to go watch it because they want to see for themselves, like, what would I think? I just think this kind of movie would do so well in theaters if it really was given the proper chance. And it's not the best movie of the year, and I don't know if it's even going to be a big awards contender for the Oscars or anything, but what I can say is the movie is worth your time. It's a very solid film, and it's worth giving your attention to when it comes out. And it's definitely a movie I'll be thinking about for some time. Overall, I'm going to give the film a B+. Again, nothing to, like, run home about. It's probably not going to be in my top 10 or anything at the end of the year, but I did really like it. I think it's a very solid courtroom drama. It had me engaged from beginning to end, and I think a lot of you will enjoy it if you check it out. Speaking of, though, just earlier, Warner Brothers announced that you will be able to officially see it on Max on December 20th, so if you have the streaming service Max, go check it out December 20th and give it a shot. And that about does it for this episode. If you want to follow my reviews, you can find me on Letterboxd at MovieKing1224. You can also listen to this podcast on your favorite apps such as Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Music. If you have any comments or feedback, I would love to hear it and improve this show. And of course, if you've enjoyed this episode, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification bell to hear more like it. I appreciate you all so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time. Thank you. Bye-bye.